everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's nice to have you guys here again. So today is going to be a bit of a different video. This was an idea that I kind of came up with in response to a question from one of my subscribers who also follows me on Instagram. So if you've been following me on Instagram, you'll have noticed that I have kind of been posting pictures of either the covers or individual chapters of the books that I've been reading for my comp exam. And I've been getting a lot of questions on some of those books. So I thought it might be interesting for some of you, and it would probably be very useful for me to every 5 to 10 books or so do a video where I give you like synopsis or description about the books that I'm reading. So some of these books I'll probably talk about more than others, but I'll try to keep each one short, and that way if one of these appeals to you, then you can go and look it up more. And I'll try to also remember to put all the titles and authors down in the description box. If I forget, just comment and ask me more about one of them, or more than one of them. So this might be part of like a series I start doing. If you guys like these, let me know if you find this interesting, or if you find it completely boring. It's definitely more for the academics that are following me. But some of these books, and this is why I kind of thought I would try this out on here, some of these books might also be of interest to people who aren't in college, aren't in grad school, and just maybe have a general interest in some of these subjects. So just to give a quick reminder to people who are maybe new to the channel, or have been watching for a while and have now forgotten my grad school adventure video. I'm a PhD student. I finished my third year, but I'm still kind of completing the typical third year stuff. And a big part of that is the comp exam, or the comprehensive exam. So I have a list of 60 sources, 40 books, and then 20 journal articles and book chapters that I'm reading. And I'm trying to get it done all this summer so I can take the comp exam at the end of the summer, beginning of the fall. So my dissertation is looking at fashion icons and public memory, and how our memories of certain women are constructed through our memories of their iconic wardrobes. So I'm bringing together a few different subject areas. I'm looking at fashion theory, memory studies, and material culture / gender studies. So material culture, but from a gender studies feminist perspective, if that makes sense. One of the first books I have reread, I read this before when I took a class on public memory. This is Mania, Public Feeling in America, and it's by Erica Doss. And this book is brilliant. So one of her main arguments is that memory is tied to affect and emotion, and so how we feel about certain events, that constructs how we remember them, and how we remember them specifically in memorials or monuments. There's lots of pictures of different memorials and monuments. Her main argument, so just a quote from the book, memorials, I argue, are archives of public affect, repositories of feelings and emotions that are embodied in their material form and narrative content. Really love this book. If you're interested in memorials, if you're interested in history, because she covers a lot of different history in this, really, really great. Highly recommend it. Next one, The Texture of Memory, Holocaust Memorials and Meaning by James E. Young. This one is really interesting. If you have an interest in the Holocaust, if you have an interest in Jewish history, if you have an interest in how we are still remembering Holocaust history, this book is really, really interesting. So he's looking primarily at memorials and monuments that have been built since the end of World War II and since the liberation of the concentration camps. So just to read you from the back of the book, in this landmark study of Holocaust Memorial, James E. Young explores both the idea of the monument and its role in public memory, discussing how every nation remembers the Holocaust according to its own traditions, ideals, and experiences, and how these memorials reflect the ever-evolving meanings of the Holocaust in Europe, Israel, and America. The result is a groundbreaking study of Holocaust memory, public art, and their fusion in contemporary life. So again, if you're interested in history, if you're interested in specifically history of the Holocaust and how we're remembering the Holocaust, if you're interested in public art, because a lot of these memorials that he's analyzing are memorials and monuments that have been built in kind of the middle of town, so like town squares, city centers, where you've got a lot of people going by. He talks a lot about some of the tensions behind the scenes of how these monuments and memorials get designed and kind of agreed upon before they're built. So really, really interesting. So moving into fashion, this little one called Fashion, a Philosophy, and this is by Lars Svendsen. He's a philosopher, so with the title being Fashion, a Philosophy, he really is looking at what philosophers have said about fashion. And so he's citing from a bunch of philosophers, famous historical philosophers, and what they have had to say about fashion, and then kind of creating a different idea of a philosophy of fashion. So the chapter of contents, he's looking at the principle of fashion, the origins and spread of fashion, so that's some interesting history in there. Fashion and language, fashion and the body, fashion and art, fashion and consumption, and then fashion as an ideal in life. There were a lot of things that I liked about this book. It's definitely a good one to read. There were some things that I kind of disagreed with. I feel like he really didn't talk about fashion and language as well as he could. Sometimes I feel like each of these chapters could have been their own book. It really was curious for me to see how he was talking about the subject, the sources that he was drawing on, and the section on language was especially interesting because as a rhetorician, that's kind of what I'm arguing, that clothing does communicate things. It communicates messages. It says things about us as individuals in terms of what we wear on our bodies. You know, what I'm wearing today says something about me, namely that I'm tired and I need to do laundry, and so all I had left was this navy t-shirt. So some meanings, I guess, are a little bit more hidden than others. But there are patterns that can kind of be read. So he was pretty dismissive of language and fashion having any kind of connection, but again, I think that's because he's coming at it from a philosophical standpoint, not a rhetorical standpoint. So, but it's a nice little book. It's a pretty easy read for being so philosophical. So if you can get your hands on this one, I do recommend it. I enjoyed it, even though I had some issues with it. And then Fashion and Its Social Agendas by Diane Crane. It's Class, Gender, and Identity in Clothing. I really liked this one. If you have an interest in fashion theory, fashion study, fashion history, this is definitely one that you should add to your collection. It really traces the history of clothing, sort of the modern history of clothing in the US, the UK, and France from the 19th century to now. So kind of with the more industrialized and mechanized ways of producing clothing, the rise of shopping and being able to go out and buy stuff rather than having to make everything. I was particularly interested in chapter 4, Women's Clothing Behavior as Nonverbal Resistance, Symbolic Boundaries, Alternative Dress, and Public Space. So she talks about the dress reform movements, most of them that happened in the mid-1800s. A lot of you might have heard of Amelia Bloomer and the Bloomers. And so that's what she's talking about. There were also similar dress reform movements in the UK and in France. They were not very successful. The French history was actually really interesting. She also kind of takes to task fashion historians who only look at the upper classes, and she's done a lot of research and looking at different case studies of kind of the working class and farmers and the lower socioeconomic levels, and the differences between their clothing and the middle and upper classes, as well as within the lower class, the difference between male wardrobe and what the men were wearing and what the women were wearing, which I found super fascinating. There's great pictures in the book, a lot of very historical photographs and advertisements. And it goes up through the 1990s, so definitely a good history of the 19th and 20th centuries. I tore through this book pretty quick. There were just so many great points that she made, so many great insights that she had. Her resources that she was using, the case studies and the historical documents that she was using are really, really cool. So I definitely recommend this one. Okay, so getting into the final section, kind of material culture and gender studies. This book I would recommend to anyone, and this is The Power of Glamour, Longing and the Art of Visual Persuasion by Virginia Postrel. So her main argument is that glamour is a form of nonverbal rhetoric, which I really love and works really well. All of the women that I'm studying as my subjects are kind of known for being very glamorous. So to have a whole book on glamour was just really exciting. But the book itself is gorgeous. There's lots of photographs. It's written in a very non-academic language, so it's very easy to read. So I definitely recommend this even if you're not in school, if you just have an interest in art and fashion and glamour, you'll love this book. She talks about film, television, art, advertisement, the fashion industry, the beauty industry. She talks about so many different areas. I really, really love this book. This was the second time reading it. I enjoyed it just as much reading it the second time. And then the final book, which is probably my favorite one. This is the one that I've been posting about the most recently, and that's Through the Wardrobe, Women's Relationships with Their Clothes. And this is an edited collection, edited by Ali Guy, Eileen Green, and Maura Banham. And this was just, I loved it. Oh, I really, really loved it. If you are just interested in how we use clothing, how clothing is a part of our everyday lives, I think you'd really enjoy this book. The main point of this entire book is how everyday women, ordinary women, dress and use clothing. So not looking at celebrities, not looking at fashion icons, but looking at regular, average, everyday women. I'm going to shut up because I've got a lot to edit now. I hope you found this interesting. If nothing else, it's letting you learn a little bit more about me, which can't be too bad. But hopefully one of these books has appealed to you. If you choose to get these, or if you borrow one from your library, I would love to know what you think after you've read it. Let me know what you think of this idea, of these kinds of videos in general. It was definitely helpful just now to kind of run through those. So I kind of like this idea. So let me know what you guys think. Thank you very much for watching and subscribing. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and join this wonderful, crazy family that we're kind of starting here. And I will see you all soon. Bye-bye.